Senator Bill Cassie and I and his wife went into Hunt's Correctional Facility. We screened 100 men and 100 women for dyslexia. They found that 54% of those men and women read on a 3rd to a 4th grade level. Now, you have a prison system that is replete with illiterate people. They are doing labor. They're building furniture, kitchen appliances, underwear. They do jeans. They manufacture all kinds of stuff in prison. I left prison after a 4-year reprieve. I left there with $82. So it's a big business. And so this is why they don't want to address this issue, because you're going to curtail the prison population through literacy. People who are illiterate won't end up in prison.
This is Megan, owner of Dyslexia on Demand.
And I'm Erin, owner of Advocate to Educate.
And we are the Don't Call on Me podcast.
We are here to talk about dyslexia, to remove the stigma, to hear what families really go through, and to share their stories.
In both of our businesses and personal experiences, on a daily basis, we listen to people telling their stories. Many of heartbreak, many of struggle, but most all have a silver lining, even eventually.
It's all about the stories. The more we share, the more we realize we aren't alone and we are a community. No, a tribe standing together. The Don't Call on Me podcast is brought to you by Dyslexia on Demand and Advocate to Educate.
Welcome back, listeners, to the Don't Call on Me podcast. If you've been moved by these stories, don't forget to follow or leave us a quick rating, because it helps more people find us and feel seen. But today's guest is someone whose story is so powerful. We're joined by Ameer Baraka, who's an Emmy-nominated actor, an author, and a recognized advocate for dyslexia. Ameer grew up in the streets of New Orleans, entered the prison system before age 15, and didn't learn to read until his mid-20s, when he was finally diagnosed with dyslexia. We're going to hear about his stories from his experiences, all the way from a young child in school, all the way through who he is today. So Ameer, welcome to the Don't Call Me podcast.
Thank you so much for having me to the Don't Call Me podcast. Pretty cool. I like that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me.
Did you just like connect the name? Like, because a lot of people, they're like, I love the name because don't call on me, please, ever.
Yeah. I like that.
Tariq,
I just caught that.
Right? There you go. We got it in real time. That's perfect. All right, Ameer, can you share with us where are you currently living?
I'm currently here in New Orleans. I'm between New Orleans and Atlanta. I got homes in both places, but I'm here for the time being until I leave out on Sunday to go to Boston. I have a conference out in Boston for Nelson.
All right. So today is going to be all about your story. Your story is far too common, unfortunately, and unique, because we want to hear what happened to you, not the general story. We know a little bit about your past and know that it's sad that, we wish nobody could relate to this, but we know that that is just not fact. So why don't we take it all the way back? Why don't you share with us the early stages of becoming a learner for you and those elementary school years? Share with us what it was like.
I think when I knew something was wrong with me was when I got into the 3rd grade, because there I had to take spelling tests and I couldn't spell. I never passed a spelling test. And so my grandmother was a big advocate of education. And she always said that the only way that the Negro was going to get out of poverty was through education. She herself was a washer. She had a 3rd grade education. And she would go on St. Charles Street in different neighborhoods and wash white people's clothes, take care of their kids. And so she did not want that life for us. My mother, who was a young mother, she was divorced early with 3 kids. She was very derelict in her duty when it came to raising us. So my grandmother took on the responsibility of educating us. And so my brother Deshaun and my sister Rashawn were precocious learners. They read fluently. they were able to decode rapidly, and I wasn't. And so we had a chalkboard in our house, and my grandmother believed in putting the words in your hand. If you didn't know your words, you would be beaten with a belt in your hands. And I was beaten severely. There was a lot of crying in the house when it came to me because maybe my grandmother thought I was playing around or I didn't want to learn. But I just couldn't spell. I could not spell. Dash and I went to the same schools, the same classrooms. He was a year older than I was. And so we had the same teachers, and he was able to get it, but I didn't. And so I was beaten severely, and I just fell behind. It was a lot of name calling from my mother because I wasn't doing well. I was always causing trouble, trying to get out of the classroom. So early on, I started sleeping in the project hallways on Friday. I would avoid school and go sleep in the hallways every Friday. And I've gotten beaten for it, but it didn't matter because I realized that the conventional way of school was not for me. I was not going to be educated. That was not in my cards. And so with that fatalistic attitude, I rebelled. But one thing that I can say is that I had to find alternative ways to get resources. And while Dash and Rashawn during the summertime would be playing football or running track, I was out working with a guy in my neighborhood. His name was Big Man. He sold watermelons. He cut grass. And I would be out hustling with him because I wanted to make money. I would go wash car windows. I had a bucket and a squeegee thing, and I would go and wash windows, make $90 a day, washing people's windows, getting tips, and at a very early age. So I knew early on that I had to do something other than school.
I mean, what a young age to discover that. While other kids are like, I got to study for this test, you're like, no, let's go real world. What do I need to do? And you did it, which my guess is there are not a lot of kids your age doing that, but you had that brain that worked in your favor in a sense, like you found value for a little bit in that process because I know what to come went a different way. So your memories, those core memories, I'm gonna guess, put you in a place of I'm stupid, I'm not a learner, and it's
Yeah.
pointless. So I'm gonna do something else, and to any extent.
Right. So back to what you were saying, the name calling definitely impacted my emotional and spiritual well-being, which produced a lot of self-imposed limitations with distorted thinking, causing me to further dismiss the idea of any kind of, I avoided a lot of friends, particularly those who were educated, kids who were smart. And so I was more or less of a loner coming up, trying to find my way through. And a couple guys, I would say in the projects, predatorial. They need people to hold their drugs. And so I was one of the guys that was embraced by a young man who, at that time, he was probably 30 years old. I was rather in the fourth grade, and he called me his son, and I would hold his drugs. And I became fascinated with it. I'm like, okay, this is another way that I can make money. I can hold drug dealers' drugs, and I can make me $40 a night and still be home before my mom come home from work. And I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. But I had some reservations because I was still a baby. It was up until I got into the sixth grade that I made the choice of selling drugs. When I was called in front of the classroom just to read a paragraph, what an embarrassment, right? That teacher had me up there for quite a while, saying all these words. And I'm like, oh God, I'm sweating. And I made it up in my mind that I was going to sell drugs. So at this time, I probably, 13 years old. And I meet this guy, 14. I meet a guy named Mike because I had gotten kept back in the third grade. And so I meet this guy, and he was a drug dealer. And I would go with him to pick up cocaine and stuff like that. And so I'm like, okay, this is the business I want to get in. So this was my way out. Selling drugs was my way out. And at the age of 14, I was already a hyperactive kid. Cocaine really hypes you up. It takes you to a whole nother level. And I was just spiraling out of control. I was just angry child who felt abandoned, alienated, ostracized. Physically, I was abused. but that was my life. And that's the life I chose. I wrote a book titled The Life I Chose, The Streets Lied to Me. And I bought into the lifestyle of the street life, not because I grew up in poverty. It was because I could not read. I never loved school. I never in my life dreamt about becoming a dentist, a lawyer. I didn't have those type of dreams. I used to pray because my grandmother always told us about God and how God will bless you, and how you have to pray and you have to live right. And so I used to pray and ask God to make me a big time drug dealer. I wanted to be a powerful drug dealer. I wanted to take that money and help kids. I wanted to put swings in the projects. And I used to sit on my porch and say, God, when I be a big time drug dealer, I'm going to buy kids big wheels. I'm going to do this for kids. I had all these fantasies, right, about what I wanted to do with my money once I became a big time drug dealer.
And you guys both used the term child, and I think that I want to just make sure and emphasize that, because I think that sometimes, I'm sure that you felt bigger than a child, but the reality is the age that you're referring to, I have a child at that age. You are still such a child. Looking at you now and just hearing, the age, you kind of lose sight of how young you really were and where you should have been in your mindset, and really where you had to be at that age.
I think it was definitely due to a lot of scenarios. One being, my dad was a heroin addict. He walked out on my mother to chase his dreams of using heroin and left us, went to Chicago. My mother was a very young mother. She didn't want anything to do with perhaps raising children because she was young herself and she wasn't educated. And so it was like the perfect pot of gumbo, right? It was the correct ingredients to create this child who were on his way to either prison for the rest of his life or being killed like many of my friends who are dead and gone now. But by God's mercy and grace, I'm here. And I'm thankful and I'm grateful to be here. And that's why I'm so passionate about early screening. I'm passionate about trying to force people to address this issue, because I know how innocuous this is if not being addressed properly and at a quick time. And so when I think about my forefathers, like my grandmother who had a third grade education, but when I think about her mother, her father who could not read, as slaves and so forth, I understand how a slave must have felt, because you cannot think properly. You cannot process. Your self-esteem is shot. Everything about you as a human being encompasses reading. It boosts your self-esteem. You're able to dream through reading because I can pick up a book, right? And so I'm able to see that place when I read. And when you cannot see it, you cannot achieve it. So that's why I never saw success as a doctor or a dentist or that kind of stuff. That was a pipe dream for me. It wasn't realistic.
One thing I want to just throw out there is how powerful dyslexia is, in the sense that you and I we had polar opposite childhoods. Yet dyslexia took me down because of the trauma that occurs at the same time, where you're going into school. School is designed around people who are literate. And even of course, we have different stories, but only by the fact that we were born into different families. Like, that's it, right? It's our circumstance had our path play out. But what is so strong with dyslexics is we get what it feels like. And I know I've never met another dyslexic that isn't a diehard. Eventually, sometimes it takes them a while, or they're too young to really, really get the full circle, right? But we know how it feels, and we would do anything to help others not feel alone, feel validated, all of that. And it really speaks to our system in America, and loud and clear what needs to change, because it starts in those classrooms right from the beginning.
That's something that Aaron and I preach about all the time is if just the system could change. And I think that it's so important that we also understand another quote that Frederick Douglass said was it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And that's exactly what we're dealing with here. There's just such an implication of that instruction not being designed for everyone from the jump.
Well, the thing is that here's what I came up with, right? When you look back at slavery, I don't think slavery was based too much upon color, right? It was about free labor. I think eventually it evolved rather rapidly into racism, right? And colorism, right? But from the inception, it was about who is going to work in these fields. They tried the Native Americans, didn't work. They tried the Chinese, it didn't work. But the Negro was strong and durable. And so after the Emancipation Proclamation, President Lincoln signed that the slaves should be free. They did not inaugurate that until 2 years later because they needed the free labor. And once they did that, they came up with something that was called the Black Codes, which was, okay, now all these slaves are free. Some slaves stayed on the plantation because they were illiterate. They were bound. They were not only physically enslaved, but they were mentally enslaved, that's one of the most dangerous form of incarceration is mental incarceration. Now, when you think about today's time, Senator Bill Cassidy and I and his wife went into Hunt's Correctional Facility. We screened 100 men and 100 women for dyslexia. They found that 54% of those men and women read on a 3rd to a 4th grade level. Now, you have a prison system that is replete with illiterate people. They are doing labor. They're building furniture, kitchen appliances, underwear. They do jeans. They manufacture all kinds of stuff in prison. I left prison after a 4-year reprieve. I left there with $82. So it's a big business. And so this is why they don't want to address this issue because you're going to curtail the prison population through literacy. People who are illiterate won't end up in prison. Now, the deal is they need that free labor. There's something that's called they privatize prisons, right? So people are invested in prison, like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is heavily invested in private prisons. So let's say you open up a prison here in New Orleans in Plaquemine Parish somewhere, right? A St. John Parish. They are guaranteed, the state guarantees these people that this prison will be here. It's not going to go out of business. So there's lobbyists that go out and say, okay, let's give these people some time. They stole 2 cars. Let's give them 20 years because they want to make do on their end of the bargain. I went to jail. I was facing 30 years, but by me being a multiple offender, I was facing 60 years. So this is why Louisiana have more people incarcerated per 100,000 than anywhere in the country because of the long, extensive sentence. And these are draconian sentences. And so you have people here that have been locked up in prison for 20 years for marijuana. And so, but the free, you got to think, I'm thinking about the free labor. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about who's making this money off these people building sofas and dinette sets. Who's making that money? That's what I'm thinking about. Okay, you committed a crime. I understand that. But I'm talking about the free labor. When I did come home after committing the crime, I still couldn't read. And so I went back to that which I was familiar with. I tried to read. I tried, but there was no one there to help me. I was in school while in the youth jail for a year, but no one was there to teach me how to read. I tried, I really did, because I just wanted to give it a shot. And so I got out, started back selling drugs while in school. And this time I wound up getting busted with a quarter kilo of cocaine. And I was facing all this time. And while there, I discovered something. I had this moment there was a white guy who was an art thief. His name was John. He had stole $10 million worth of art. John had gotten everything that he wanted while he was in that jail. He was very articulate. And many of the black guys looked over John, alienated him. But I had white people in my family, right? So I was accustomed to always dealing with white people. And so John would speak so well. And I'm like, John, man, how do you get everything you want in this prison? He said, Amir, I listen to you guys day in and day out. You can't articulate. No one will never respect you. And so I started mimicking John. The warden would come up and down the prison checking, good morning, warden, how are you? Not, hey, warden, how you doing? And just the power of those words brought so much respect. And so I got on this journey of learning to read. And I would write certain words down I didn't know, like that, though, tomorrow, yesterday. I couldn't spell any of those words. And I just wanted to learn to read because I realized that it was my inability to read that got me here. The only thing that was going to free me was me learning to read. I was reading on a third grade level at 23 years old. But what woke me up even more is, and as I was driving down this long road towards the prison, on each side of the road were black men in the fields with swing blades, cutting the grass. And I said, oh my God, I've put myself into slavery. I saw what my forefathers had went through. And I'm like, oh God, I don't want this type of life. So I knew that while I was there in that prison, I had to learn to read. And there was this GED teacher, and he said, Amir, listen, I realized that I looked at your reading scores, you're reading poorly. He began to ask me about, could my mother read? Could my brother read? I'm like, yeah, they could read. And he had a lady come into prison, and she had us screened. And he told me that about 2 months later afterwards, he said, Amir, I think you have dyslexia. I had no idea what that was. I thought dyslexia coincided with what my mother said, that I was stupid and dumb. So it was affirming that something must be wrong with me, but it wasn't. He said, what he said, many people have dyslexia, Amir. Something he told me, I can't not remember verbatimly because this was years ago. But immediately what I did was I got on the phone and I called my mom and I said, Mama, I'm not stupid and dumb. I'm dyslexic. And so I tried to communicate that to her, what he had told me, but it freed me. Only thing I wanted to know that I was not stupid and dumb. I mean, it was like God had downloaded this desire for me to learn. And for 4 years, that's all I did on my free time. And everything I got my hands on, I wanted to read. And when I attained my GED at the end of those 4 years, right at the 4-year mark, I felt so good about myself, and so reading freed me. I knew when I got out of that prison, I was never coming back because I now can read.
I have this feeling that isn't moved to tears, it's moved to freedom, which is like I'm feeling that the weight lifted off of you. Like you figured out the code, you broke the code. And because you broke the code, what that opened up for you was the rest of the world.
You go into a school. I was in a school here with the Cassidys, elementary school, and I was talking to a kindergarten teacher about dyslexia. She was completely oblivious. I'm like, you don't know what dyslexia is? And so they teach the kid whole English where it's cat, right? But they have a cat on the side of the word cat.
Yep.
No, you can't teach a child like that. It's cat.
And that's
right?
part of our problem because right now, 80% of our US states do have screening legislation. That being said, once they have the answer to that, they don't have a system or a plan in place for the next step, which is that's extraordinarily important, is that what we do with those answers. Yes.
That's what I'm fighting my ass off for right now and yelling and screaming for.
Good.
I spoke in DC and what's his name? His dad was a senator, Ron Paul, right? I think his name is Rand Paul.
Rand, yeah.
Rand, okay. So we go into his office and he makes a statement. He said, oh, dyslexic kids are going to be fine. We don't have to worry about them. I said, look at this idiot.
Yeah.
These people are it. So that's why I wrote the book, The Ugly Side of Dyslexia. Undiagnosed, the ugly side of dyslexia. Because when we see dyslexia in America, there's some white woman, right? Mostly
Yep.
white women with their children, and they're saying, well, my child is dyslexic and, I'm having him remediated for $100 and now he's learned to read. But there's an ugly side to that. What about the kid who parents don't have $75 or
Yep.
$100
Uh-huh.
an hour,
Uh-huh.
right? So when you think about people like Rand Paul, who says, we don't have to worry about the dyslexic child, dyslexic child is going to be great. What an idiot. The man is an idiot. I don't know how he became a senator. And I say that
Thank
not,
you.
I
No,
walked out of the
say
meeting,
it.
right?
Yeah. We need to just say what it is because these people are like, they need to be called out. Yep.
Yeah, they're in a different world, right? They are in a different world. They're in a different tax bracket. If their child was dyslexic, it's okay. It's fine.
Right.
I got money to get Johnny the help that he needs. I got $30,000 a year. But what about Lil Kojo out in the Calio project, right? His parents doesn't have $30,000. And you got guys like Richard Branson who said, don't touch the dyslexic brain. You shouldn't teach the dyslexic brain how to read. You mess it up. Who are these people? Who are you?
I
That's what the
knew I
slave
didn't like
masters.
him. Yeah, I knew
Yeah.
I've always told Megan, the way he spins, it's a strength. You are so entitled to frame it in that
Oh,
way
he's so entitled.
without,
He's a
I
billionaire.
mean, exactly. So of course he's going to say, oh, it doesn't matter.
I mean, it's so many, this thing impacts you in so many different ways. But hey, I'm going to continue to push. I'm going to continue to do what I do. But it just disturbs me when you have these people, these privileged people out there talking about it's the genius brain. It's a gift.
Of course. And most of us do. Most of us, regardless, of where you are, there is the sheer torment. Obviously, you were in a crime scene, right? It could have been you. You could have been killed in all of this because of something
Absolutely.
that is a basic human right that is so that the information out there, and I get into this a lot with general education teachers because they minimize the seriousness of what it means. The sad reality is that if your family has money to pay for you to get the intervention, you might bypass some of the trauma. My family had the money, yet I went into my own mental health crisis that nearly took me out because of this issue. So, what parents don't get is the emotional impact of dyslexia is something that we don't realize, or we realize, but the rest of the world needs to respect. And I feel it's a lack of respect for a learner because they just spew information that's not true because they can't fathom that our systems would be so inaccurately educating our children. All right. Well, as we wrap up, share with us. I know you mentioned your books, but we want specifics. So tell us where we can find your books, where a listener could reach out to you, and what's out in the world right now that you're part of.
Okay. Well, my social media handler is Ameer Baraka, AmeerBaraka. I've written 2 books. You can get them on Amazon. Undiagnosed, The Ugly Side of Dyslexia. The other one is The Life I Chose, Streets Lied to Me. Well, I was just in Virginia, at a conference in Virginia. I went into a youth facility there. This month, I'm on my way to Boston. I'm going to some prison in Boston they got me going into. So I'm always going into prisons, not only talking about dyslexia, but I'm talking about the psychology of incarceration that deals with thoughts, actions, and behavior that are associated with self-imposed and state-imposed incarceration. Self-imposed incarceration. There's a self-imposed incarceration. And what I mean by that is thoughts become actions and actions become behavior. So there's a self-imposed incarceration. You're self-incarcerated the moment you get into the criminal lifestyle of thinking about a crime and doing crime. It all starts here. I know that I will never go back to prison again because my values have changed. I value freedom. I value the fact that I love my mother enough not to put her in a precarious situation where she has to worry about me going to jail. So you got to get people to start thinking. As a man thinketh, so is he. So strength is in the mind. And so I go through this curriculum and getting guys involved in thinking, man. You got to think, right? And so it's all about thinking. We teach children math, science, and history, but we don't teach people how to think.
Amen.
You got to think, man.
We talk about that too.
Yeah, so that's where I am. And I'm just excited about my work. I'm on a new show, is a team with Tyler Perry. But the only thing is that the character is not dyslexic. So when I go back next season, I'm going to try to convince Tyler Perry to make my character dyslexic, you know?
Hell yes. Yeah. Hell yes. Love it. Not that Tyler Perry cares what I think, but, you know, I'll write you a letter of rep. What?
Well, write me a letter, right? Because, you know, Sanja from IDA, she's the CEO of IDA. She wrote a letter to Tyler Perry and gave it to me, an email. So pleading with him, make the character dyslexic, because, you know, it brings on different audiences.
That's right.
That will change the character in a way to make it the depth of meaning there. Because I think that when people realize how close to home it is, they start to shift in thinking, right? And so sometimes it's about doing some digging and finding out, okay, well, if they're not buying it because it's not meaningful enough. I mean, the fact that dyslexia is way more common than we think. Sometimes I you know, even with parents, when I'm trying to get them to understand what their kids are going through, and they're like, well, I'm not dyslexic. I don't understand. And I'm like, well, think about your parents. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, no, grandpa or whatever. Really? Yeah, you're right. They weren't literate. And you're like, okay, now do you see?
Well, I was just going to ask one like kind of parting question. Yeah. And that is, out of all of your sage wisdom, if you were talking, and I know you do, what is like the one message you want a young person who's struggling right now to take away from your story? Do you have just one?
Yeah, I would tell my younger self, Ameer, be patient. Don't give up. Still dream. No matter what you're going through, those emotions, still hold on to your dream. It's definitely possible. So it's very important until that person gets the help he or she needs, right? I mean, some people forego their dreams because they say, well, I can't read, and they give up. Never do that. Never, 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 never. It's the worst thing that you can do.
Just like Aaron was saying, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us today and share your story. I know I've grown from your story. And I think, just like you said, that the ugly side of dyslexia is something that more people need to share.
Thank you. We are honored to have you here today. Honored. And I can't wait to see what you're doing for the community in the future, for your community, for the world. And I'm just feeling so much gratitude. So thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate it. And hopefully, God willingly, we could have the script for my life story, Undiagnosed, the Ugly Side of Dyslexia. And hopefully we can get that into theaters. That's the goal.
That would be wonderful.
It'll happen. I know it. Yeah. It will.
Absolutely.
All right, listeners, we'll see you next time.
Today's episode is sponsored by Advocate to Educate. We help parents navigate through the confusing maze of special education in public schools in California. We support families starting as early as preschool through 12th grade, creating individual education plans to support the specific needs of your unique and amazing child. To learn more, go to our website, advocate2educate.com.
Today's episode is sponsored by Dyslexia On Demand. Dyslexia On Demand uses only the highest trained dyslexia therapists, and it's all one-on-one and individualized to your child's needs. The best part is that it doesn't matter where you're located because it's all virtual. Visit us at dyslexiaondemand.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning in to Don't Call on Me. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow us on social media channels and YouTube to stay connected. And help us spread awareness by sharing your own stories at don'tcallonme.com. Your voice can make a difference. Join us in building a supportive community, one story at a time. See you next episode.